My son's car screeched away. It left me standing alone at a bus stop. "You need help, Mom," he had yelled. His voice was full of anger. A quiet voice beside me whispered, "Pretend you're my wife. Your son will regret this." That's when my life truly began. The afternoon sun was merciless. It beat down on the pavement. I watched my son Daniel's car disappear. The sound of his tires was a final, angry punctuation to our argument. At 67 years old, I never thought I would be in this position. My own son had just abandoned me. He drove away in a fit of rage. "I'm not a child, Daniel," I had told him. My voice trembled. I tried so hard to stay calm. "I don't need you arranging my life. I am not incompetent." His response was just as I expected. It was dismissive. "Mom, you're being unreasonable," he said. His words were sharp. They cut deep. "That senior living facility is perfect. It has activities. It has medical staff. It has everything you need. Everything except my independence," I had countered. My voice was low but firm. I felt the last of my patience wearing thin. That was when he pulled the car over. It was abrupt and angry. "Fine," he snapped. "If you're so independent, find your own way home. Maybe that will teach you that you need help." The words hung in the air. They were heavy with his frustration. He didn't wait for a reply. He just drove off. The red taillights of his car blurred as they turned the corner. Only then did I realize the full extent of my problem. My purse was not with me. It sat on my kitchen counter. I had left it there in our rush to leave. My wallet was inside. My bus pass was there too. My phone was in my pocket. I had grabbed it at the last minute. The screen showed only 3% battery. A wave of humiliation washed over me. My cheeks burned. A woman my age with no way to get home. I am a widow. I was a teacher for 30 years. I taught literature to young minds. Now I was just a stranded old woman. My only child couldn't understand me. He couldn't see that a retirement community felt like a prison. That kind of place would kill my spirit. It would kill me faster than any sickness. The bench at the bus stop was hard to sit on. It offered no comfort to my arthritic hip. I sat down heavily. I thought about my options. My apartment was at least 4 miles away. Could try to walk, but my hip ached just thinking about it. I could ask a stranger to use their phone, but my pride was a bitter pill to swallow. And who would I even call? My few friends who still drove were my age. They might not see a message for hours. Calling Daniel was entirely out of the question. I would not give him the satisfaction. I was lost in these dark thoughts. I didn't notice someone sitting down beside me. A cultured male voice spoke quietly. "Pardon me," he said, "but I couldn't help overhearing your predicament." I turned. An elegant man in his early 70s sat next to me. Dark sunglasses covered his eyes. A white cane rested against the bench. He was dressed impeccably. My late husband Frank would have called it old money attire. A perfectly tailored light gray suit. It looked comfortable even in the summer heat. "I'm fine really," I said. It was an automatic response. Embarrassment colored my voice. How much had he heard? A slight smile crossed his face. "I may be blind," he said, "but my hearing is excellent. Your son left you here. He didn't make sure you could get home. That strikes me as inconsiderate." There was something direct about his words. They broke through my defenses. "That's one word for it," I admitted. My voice was quiet. Another word might be cruel. He angled his face toward me. His expression was serious now. "Pretend you're my wife," he said. His voice was lower. "My driver is coming. Your son will regret leaving you like this." I blinked. The offer was so unexpected. Took my breath away. "I couldn't possibly," I stammered. The idea was absurd. It was like a scene from a movie. "I'm Robert Wilson," he continued smoothly. He extended his hand. It moved with surprising accuracy toward mine. "And you are?" "Martha Collins," I replied. I took his hand without thinking. His grip was warm and firm. It felt steady. "Well, Martha Collins," he said, "I'm offering you a dignified solution. It's for an undignified situation. There are no strings attached." He tilted his head slightly. "Unless you're uncomfortable accepting help from a blind old man." Something in his tone made me smile. It was the first time I had smiled all day. "Being blind doesn't make you incapable, Mr. Wilson," I said, "just as being older doesn't make me incapable, despite what my son believed." He laughed then. It was a genuine sound. It crinkled the corners of his eyes above his dark glasses. "Touché, Mrs. Collins," he said. "Then we understand each other." Before I could answer, a sleek black car pulled up. It stopped right at the curb. The driver got out. He was a distinguished-looking man. He was about my age. He approached us. "Right on time, James," Robert said. He gathered his cane. "We'll be giving Mrs. Collins a ride home today." If James thought this was strange, he didn't show it. "Of course, sir," he said. He gave me a slight nod. Ma'am. James helped Robert to the car. His movements were practiced and efficient. I hesitated. My whole life I had been cautious. I was sensible, Martha Collins. I did not get into a car with a stranger. Not even elegant blind gentlemen with chauffeurs. It wasn't something I did. And yet, my phone finally died. It made a sad little beep in my pocket. At that moment, I made a decision. It felt like stepping off a cliff. Thank you, I said. I allowed James to open the rear door for me. The car's interior was cool, a welcome relief from the oppressive heat. It smelled of rich leather and a subtle, expensive cologne. Where do we have the pleasure of taking you, Mrs. Collins? Robert asked. His voice was smooth as James started the engine. I gave my address. It was in a modest neighborhood on the east side of town. I had moved there after Frank's death. Selling our large family home had been a painful necessity. Robert was quiet for a moment. He seemed to be considering something. Actually, he said, I hope you'll allow me to offer you tea first. My home is nearby. After such an eventful afternoon, you might appreciate a moment to collect yourself. The proper response would have been to decline. I should have politely insisted on going home, but I didn't. Instead, I thought about what was waiting for me at my apartment. Empty rooms. The lingering echo of Daniel's angry voice. The humiliation of the day still felt heavy, pressed down on me like a physical weight. Tea would be lovely, I heard myself say. The words surprised me as much as they did him. We drove through neighborhoods that grew increasingly upscale. Grand houses sat behind manicured lawns. I studied Robert Wilson more closely. His silver hair was perfectly cut. His hands were well kept, but they looked strong. His blindness seemed to have done nothing to diminish his confidence. There was something almost theatrical about him. The precision of his movements was remarkable. The way he turned his head when I spoke. The way his expressions perfectly matched the tone of my voice. It was all so practiced. If you're wondering if you've made a terrible mistake, he said suddenly. It was as if he could read my thoughts. I assure you, James has an impeccable driving record. And I'm far too old and respectable to be dangerous. I found myself chuckling. The sound felt foreign after the day's tension had worn off. I was actually thinking you seem remarkably well adjusted, I said, for someone who can't see. Ah, he replied. A small smile touched his lips. Well, one adapts or one becomes bitter. I chose the former. The car turned through an ornate gate. It drove up a long, curved driveway. I couldn't suppress a gasp. Robert Wilson's home was a mansion. It was a stunning colonial revival. Perfectly manicured grounds stretched out in every direction. It was like something from a magazine. Welcome to my humble abode, Robert said. I could hear the hint of irony in his voice. I hope you like Earl Grey. The grandeur of the place left me speechless. James helped us get out of the car. The mansion stood 3 stories tall. Its front was perfectly symmetrical. Elegant columns and large windows caught the afternoon sun. Flower gardens bloomed in vibrant, carefully planned colors. Somewhere in the distance, I heard the gentle sound of a fountain. Your silence suggests one of 2 things, Robert commented. We walked toward the massive front entrance. Either you're admiring the view, or you're reconsidering having tea with a stranger. It's a bit overwhelming, I admitted. My voice was a whisper. You didn't mention you lived in a palace. His lips quirked into a smile. Hardly a palace, though I suppose it is rather large for one person. The family has owned it for generations. I find comfort in familiar surroundings, especially since losing my sight. James opened the heavy front door. As we stepped inside, I noticed something odd. The house had no special accommodations for people who are blind. There were no textured pathways on the floor, no markings on the doorways. Everything was simply beautiful. It was designed for someone who could see. I hesitated. The house doesn't seem particularly adapted for. I trailed off, unsure how to phrase it. For a blind man, Robert finished for me. He was not offended. I prefer aesthetic beauty over practicality. I've memorized every inch of this place. 15 years without sight teaches one to map spaces quite efficiently. We entered a foyer with a soaring ceiling. A grand staircase curved upward. It looked like something from a classic Hollywood film. A crystal chandelier hung above us. It cast rainbow prisms across the marble floors. We'll take tea in the garden room, Robert told James. And perhaps some of those lemon biscuits Mrs. Chin made yesterday. Very good, sir, James replied. He disappeared down a long hallway. Robert offered me his arm. Again, his accuracy was surprising. Shall we? He asked. The garden room offers a pleasant view, or so I'm told. I took his arm. I was struck again by his confidence. As we walked, I noticed small things. The way he occasionally trailed his fingers along a wall. He seemed to count his steps under his breath. He was navigating this vast space from memory. The garden room was a sunlit conservatory. It had floor-to-ceiling windows. They overlooked the immaculate grounds. Comfortable wicker furniture with plush cushions was arranged in small groups. Large potted plants filled the space. The room felt both grand and intimate. It was a display of wealth without being showy. "Please make yourself comfortable," Robert said. He gestured to a chair near the windows. He settled into an adjacent one with practiced ease. He placed his cane carefully beside him. "Have you lived here long?" I asked. I was still trying to connect this man with this incredible home. "All my life," he replied, with a few breaks for school and business. "I've closed off parts of it since losing my sight. There's no point in keeping rooms I'll never see again." A note of sadness was in his voice. Touched me. "I downsized after my husband died," I offered. "Our family home felt too empty with just me." "Frank, wasn't it?" he asked. "Your husband's name?" I blinked in surprise. "Yes, but I don't remember mentioning." "You're wearing a wedding band," he explained smoothly. "And you referred to yourself as Mrs. Collins, not Mississippi. You also mentioned your son, so I made an educated guess. Was it a long marriage?" 42 years, I replied. The memory brought a soft smile. "High school sweethearts. He was an engineer. A heart attack took him 5 years ago. My condolences. A significant loss." James returned then. He carried a tea service that was fit for royalty. Delicate china, silver serving pieces. A tiered plate held an array of small sandwiches and biscuits. "Will there be anything else, sir?" James asked. "No thank you, James. We'll manage." Robert waited until James had left. Then he spoke again. "Now then, Martha Collins, former teacher. Literature, I would guess from your speech patterns. Widow. Mother to at least one controlling son. Tell me, why did he leave you stranded today?" My hand froze. I was reaching for a teacup. How did he know so much? "Teachers have a certain way of speaking," he explained. His smile was gentle. "Precise vocabulary. Complete sentences, even in casual conversation. You mentioned being older but not incapable. That suggested retirement. The rest I heard at the bus stop." He paused. "I may be blind, but I'm far from unobservant." As he poured the tea with surprising skill, I started to talk. I told him about Daniel's campaign to move me into assisted living. It had been going on for months. He had arranged today's tour without even asking me. He presented it as a done deal. I told Robert about the argument that had occurred in the car. It had escalated so quickly. It ended with my impulsive demand to be let out. "You were asserting your independence." Robert nodded. He understood completely, and he responded by trying to prove your dependence. Exactly. The validation from this stranger felt powerful. It was something I hadn't realized I needed. Daniel doesn't see the irony. He says I can't manage on my own. Then he abandons me to teach me a lesson about needing help. Children often struggle to see their parents as individuals, Robert observed. He sipped his tea. "My daughter, Sophia, went through a similar phase. It was right after my sight deteriorated. She wanted to manage everything. My medical care, my business interests, my daily routine. It took time for her to understand. Blindness hadn't made me less competent." The tea was perfect. The sandwiches were delicate and delicious. As we talked, I began to feel more relaxed. It was a feeling I hadn't had in months. Robert was a great listener. He was a thoughtful conversationalist. He drew parallels between my experiences teaching teenagers and his own challenges in the business world. "I founded a technology company," he explained when I asked. "We specialize in security systems. It's ironic, isn't it? I can't even see the screens our software protects." Something about that statement felt odd. But before I could think about it, the door opened. A striking woman in her early 40s walked in. "Dad," she began, "James mentioned you had a guest." She stopped short when she saw me. Surprise was clear on her face. "Sophia, perfect timing," Robert said. He turned his head in her direction. "This is Martha Collins. Martha, this is my daughter, Sophia Wilson." Sophia recovered quickly. She extended a perfectly manicured hand. "How lovely to meet you," she said. Her tone was friendly, but I could feel her evaluating me. Her eyes took in my simple dress and practical shoes. It was a subtle, quick assessment. I recognized that look. It was the same protective calculation I had used. I'd give it to Frank's elderly aunts when they visited after he retired. "Your father rescued me from a rather awkward situation," I explained. I briefly told her about being left at the bus stop. Something in Sophia's face softened. "That sounds exactly like something Dad would do," she said. She glanced at her father. Her expression was a mix of exasperation and fondness. "Always collecting strays." "Martha is hardly a stray," Robert countered. His tone was light but firm. "She's a retired literature teacher. Her son needs remedial education in respecting his mother's autonomy." Sophia laughed. It was a genuine sound that changed her whole demeanor. "Well, then you're in good hands," she said. "Dad has strong opinions about autonomy." He checked her watch. "I can't stay. Board meeting in 30 minutes. Will you be at the foundation dinner tomorrow night? Wouldn't miss it, Robert replied. Sophia kissed her father's cheek and left. After she was gone, Robert tilted his head. "My daughter," he said in a conspiratorial whisper. "She thinks I need constant supervision. The blindness makes her nervous. Even after all these years." I studied him carefully. Something was still nagging at me. Something about his manner. "She seems lovely," I said. "Protective, but that's natural." "Indeed," Robert agreed. He set down his teacup with perfect precision. "Now shall we get you home? Before your son sends out a search party." James drove me home as the evening shadows grew long. Robert insisted on coming with me. He said he wanted to complete the rescue properly. We sat side by side in the luxurious back seat. I could smell the subtle scent of his cologne. It was expensive and understated. Sandalwood. "Your son will likely be worried by now," Robert remarked. We turned onto my street. I checked my watch and sighed. It's been 3 hours since he left me. He's either frantic with worry or still fuming with anger. My apartment building came into view. It was a modest but clean complex. Most of the residents were retirees like me. It was nothing like Robert's grand estate, but it was home. "There's a car parked in front of your building," Robert observed casually. "A dark blue sedan. A man is pacing beside it." I squinted through the windshield. It was Daniel. Then I froze. I turned and looked at Robert sharply. How did he know that? The car stopped. Robert's hand found mine with unerring accuracy. "Martha, would you indulge me in a small performance?" he asked. He completely ignored my unfinished question. "I'd like your son to witness your return." Understanding dawned slowly. "You want him to see me," I said, "arriving in a chauffeured luxury car, with a wealthy companion." "Precisely," he said. His smile had a hint of mischief. It made him look younger. A small lesson in presumptions, perhaps. I should have refused. It was childish. It was a petty act of revenge. But I thought of Daniel's dismissive tone. I thought of how he had driven off and left me stranded. His absolute certainty that I couldn't manage without him. The anger I had felt all day resurfaced. "What did you have in mind?" I asked. My voice was steady. Robert's plan was simple. James would open my door with formal respect. Robert would exit with my assistance, playing up his blindness just a little. I would make the introductions. Robert would express his delight at finally meeting my son. He would mention our plans for the coming week. Nothing explicitly false, Robert assured me, just enough to make him reconsider his assumptions about your capabilities and your connections. As James pulled up behind Daniel's car, my son turned. His expression changed from worry to confusion. He stared at the luxury vehicle. His eyes widened as James emerged. James opened my door and said, "Mrs. Collins." His voice carried clearly in the quiet evening air. I stepped out. I was conscious of Daniel watching every move. I turned to assist Robert just as we had planned. He emerged with dignified care. His dark glasses were in place. His hand found my arm with a practiced touch. It was the touch of someone used to navigating the world without sight. "Mom." Daniel hurried over. Relief and bewilderment fought for control of his face. "I've been calling for hours. My phone died," I said calmly. "The battery was almost gone when you left me at the bus stop." He had the grace to look ashamed. His eyes darted between me and Robert. He was clearly trying to make sense of the scene. "Daniel, I'd like you to meet Robert Wilson," I said. My tone was deliberately formal. "Robert, this is my son, Daniel." "A pleasure," Robert said. He extended his hand in Daniel's general direction. "I've heard so much about you." Daniel shook his hand automatically. His professional instincts took over despite his confusion. "I can't say the same," he said. "Mom hasn't mentioned you. We only just met today," I explained. I watched realization dawn in Daniel's eyes. He noticed the white cane, the dark glasses. After I found myself unexpectedly at a bus stop, without transportation, the implication hung heavy in the air between us. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Wilson kindly offered me a ride home," I continued smoothly, "and we discovered a mutual interest in early American literature. He's invited me to a foundation dinner tomorrow evening." "Foundation dinner?" Daniel echoed. The words sounded foreign coming from him. "The Wilson Family Foundation," Robert clarified. "We provide funding for arts education and accessibility programs. Martha's experience as an educator offers a valuable perspective." I watched my son. His marketing executive mind was working overtime. He was visibly recalculating. He processed the new data. The driver, the foundation, the unmistakable signs of wealth that Robert wore so effortlessly. "That's wonderful," Daniel managed to say. "Mom has always been passionate about education." "Indeed," Robert replied. "Her insights on making literature accessible are particularly relevant, especially for our current initiatives." He turned slightly toward me. Until tomorrow then, James will collect you at 6. I look forward to it, I replied. I was playing my part, perhaps with too much enjoyment. Robert's hand found mine. He raised it briefly to his lips. It was an old-fashioned gesture, but it seemed perfectly natural coming from him. The pleasure was entirely mine, Martha. James helped Robert back into the car. Daniel stood frozen beside me. He was still trying to process what he had just seen. The sleek car pulled away with a quiet purr. It left us alone on the sidewalk. Mom, Daniel began carefully. Who exactly is Robert Wilson? A gentleman, I replied. I retrieved my keys from my pocket. I started toward the building entrance. A gentleman who understood that my age doesn't define my competence. Daniel followed me. He was still struggling. This new information didn't fit with his image of his mother. When did I meet a wealthy, cultured man who values my company? I glanced back at him. About 20 minutes after you drove away and left me stranded. Inside my apartment, Daniel paced. I put on the kettle for tea. It was a much simpler affair than the service at Robert's mansion, but it was comforting in its familiarity. I was worried sick, Daniel finally said. When you weren't home and your phone went to voicemail. I checked the hospital's mom. That must have been frightening for you, I acknowledged. I measured tea leaves into my favorite pot. Almost as frightening as being abandoned without transportation or money. He winced. I was angry. I shouldn't have left you there. No, you shouldn't have, I agreed. My voice was firm but not unkind, just as you shouldn't make decisions about my life without consulting me first. Daniel sank onto my sofa. He ran a hand through his hair. The gesture was remarkably similar to his father's. My irritation softened a little. I'm worried about you living alone, Mom, he said. The stairs in this building, the distance from my family, your arthritis getting worse. All legitimate concerns, I said. I brought our tea to the coffee table. Concerns we could discuss as equals. Not with you making pronouncements about what's best for me, as if I were a child. Like that senior facility today. Exactly like that. Daniel studied me over his teacup. So, Robert Wilson, he said. He seemed impressive. I couldn't help smiling. His attempt to get more information was so transparent. He is. And you're having dinner with him tomorrow? With him and his foundation board? Yes. My son hesitated. I'm sorry I left you at that bus stop, he said. It was childish and cruel. Yes, it was, I agreed. Then I reached over and patted his hand. But it led to an unexpected adventure. Perhaps we should both remember that I'm still capable of those. After Daniel left, I sat alone in my apartment. He had apologized multiple times. He had promised to discuss, not dictate, plans. I replayed the events of the extraordinary day, but one detail kept nagging at me. Robert's comment about Daniel's car. How could a blind man have known its color? Or that someone was pacing beside it? And there had been other moments. The way he navigated his home was with too much precision, as he had noticed my wedding band, his perfectly aimed gestures. There were minor inconsistencies, but together they formed a pattern I couldn't quite decipher. As I got ready for bed, my phone chimed. It had been recharging. A text message from an unknown number appeared. I hope our small performance provided satisfactory results. Looking forward to tomorrow's dinner. Sleep well. R.W. I stared at the screen. I wondered what sort of man I had really met, and why the thought of seeing him again filled me with such unexpected anticipation. The next morning was a blur. My thoughts kept returning to Robert Wilson. The inconsistencies in his behavior were a puzzle I couldn't solve. I watered my small collection of houseplants. My mind was busy analyzing our interactions. I felt like I was back in the classroom, applying critical attention to a complex piece of literature. A blind man who noticed a blue car from a moving vehicle. A man who poured tea with perfect precision. His home lacked the usual modifications for the visually impaired. He texted me directly, not through an assistant. The apparent conclusion seemed impossible. That Robert Wilson, the wealthy philanthropist, was not actually blind. But if that was true, why the elaborate deception? What purpose could it possibly serve? At noon, a delivery arrived. It was an elegant box. Inside, a handwritten note in flowing script lay on top of tissue paper. For this evening's foundation dinner, I took the liberty of having Sophia select something appropriate. If it's not to your taste, please disregard. Robert. Inside the box was a stunning deep blue dress. It was exactly my size. A cashmere wrap and tasteful jewelry were also included. The presumption should have offended me. A man I barely knew was buying me clothes. But it didn't. I found myself carefully hanging up the dress. My fingers lingered on the luxurious fabric. It had been years since anyone had given me a gift like this. Longer still since I'd had a reason to wear something so elegant. My phone rang as I was examining the sapphire earrings. Mom. Daniel's voice sounded tentative. It was a tone I rarely heard from my confident son. I wanted to check in after yesterday. I'm fine, Daniel, I assured him. I settled into my reading chair. In fact, I'm preparing for this evening's event. About that, he said. He cleared his throat. I did some research on Robert Wilson. Of course he had. Daniel could never resist investigating something that didn't fit into his neat worldview. And, I prompted, he's not just wealthy, Mom, he said. His voice was hushed as if he were sharing a state secret. Forbes estimates his net worth at over $3 billion. His security technology company revolutionized digital privacy, and he's been almost completely reclusive since going blind 15 years ago. I absorbed this information slowly. $3 billion. The number felt abstract. It didn't connect to the attentive man who had rescued me from a bus stop. Why are you telling me this? I asked finally. Daniel hesitated. Because it's odd. Someone who rarely appears in public suddenly takes an interest in my mother. I'm concerned he might have ulterior motives, such as, I couldn't keep the amusement out of my voice, seducing a 67-year-old retired teacher for her vast fortune in second-hand books? Mom, please, I'm serious, he insisted. Men like Wilson operate differently. Everything is strategic. Perhaps his strategy was simply kindness, I suggested. Not everything has an angle, Daniel. After I ended the call with reassurances that I would be careful, I returned to the blue dress, and to the enigmatic man who had sent it. My teacher's mind wouldn't let go of the puzzle. The pieces just didn't fit. I did my own research. I typed Robert Wilson, blind technology magnate, into my tablet. The results were illuminating. Articles described him as a reclusive genius. He had continued to direct his company remotely after losing his sight. Photos showed a younger Robert at industry events. He was always immaculately dressed. Often he was pictured with world leaders and tech pioneers. More recent images were rare. Occasional blurry paparazzi shots showed him with dark glasses and a cane. He was always with James or his daughter. One financial blog speculated about his retreat from public life. It noted the contrast between his personal reclusiveness and his company's high profile. Another article mentioned persistent rumors. Some former employees claimed his condition was less severe than reported. They said he maintained more control over daily operations than was publicly known. Nothing was conclusive, but it was enough to fuel my growing suspicion. Robert Wilson's blindness might be, at least in part, a carefully constructed facade. By late afternoon, I was preparing for the evening with unusual care. I styled my silver hair in an elegant arrangement. I applied makeup with an attention to detail I hadn't bothered with in years. I slipped into the blue dress. It fit as if it had been made for me. Looking in the mirror, I hardly recognized myself. The woman who looked at me reflected confidence. Distinguished. Even attractive in a way I had stopped thinking about. Precisely at 6, my doorbell rang. James stood in the hallway. He was as formal as the day before. Mrs. Collins, he greeted me with a slight bow. Mr. Wilson sends his apologies. He could not collect you personally. He is attending to last-minute arrangements for the dinner. Of course, I replied. I gathered the cashmere wrap and a small evening bag. The dress is lovely, by the way. Please thank Mr. Wilson for his thoughtfulness. He has an excellent eye for such things, James said. Then he froze for a split second as if he had caught himself in a mistake. That is to say, he corrected himself quickly, he has excellent taste and trusted advisors. I noted the slip with interest, but I did not comment. He escorted me to the waiting car. The foundation dinner was held at the Wilson Museum of Contemporary Art. It was a modernist building of glass and stone, sitting on the city's waterfront. As we approached, I saw people in formal attire climbing the wide steps. Camera flashes lit up the night. Photographers were documenting the arrival of local celebrities and dignitaries. There will be press, James warned as we pulled up. Mr. Wilson asked me to escort you directly inside, to avoid unnecessary attention. James navigated me through a side entrance with practiced efficiency. We took a private elevator. It was clear this was a well-established routine. We emerged into a quiet hallway. Robert stood waiting. He was resplendent in a tailored tuxedo. His dark glasses had been replaced with a different pair, featuring subtly tinted lenses. Martha, he greeted me. He turned at the sound of our approach. His timing was once again too perfect. You came. Did you doubt I would? I asked. I let him take my hand. People often find my world intimidating, he replied. The dress suits you perfectly. Yes, I said. I oversaw his face. Sophia has an excellent eye. She does, he agreed smoothly, though I selected the color myself. Dark blue has a depth that complements your voice. My voice has a color? The idea was poetic. His smile deepened. Fine lines appeared around his mouth. When one sense is diminished, others compensate in fascinating ways. I decided to test a small theory. The earrings are particularly beautiful, I said. I deliberately did not touch them. I made no sound that would indicate their location. Without hesitation, Robert's hand rose. It hovered near my right ear, exactly where the sapphire glinted in the light. Simple elegance suits you better than ostentation. His fingers were inches from my skin. I could feel their warmth. We stood like that for a few heartbeats. The air crackled with unspoken questions. Then James discreetly cleared his throat. "Sir, the guests are assembling. Miss Wilson asked me to remind you about greeting the mayor." Robert's hand dropped. The moment was broken. "Duty calls," he said with a slight sigh. "Shall we brave the crowds together, Martha? I find these events more tolerable with pleasant company." He offered his arm with the practiced gesture of a blind man. But as I took it, I was certain. Those tinted glasses were observing me with perfect clarity. The question was no longer if Robert Wilson could see. I was now convinced he could. The question was why. Why did he pretend otherwise? And should I confront him with what I suspect? For now, I decided to observe. I would gather evidence. I would approach the mystery of Robert Wilson like a Shakespearean play. After all, as I'd often told my students, the most interesting characters are always the ones with secrets. The gala was a masterclass in elegant philanthropy. The museum's grand hall was transformed. Tables were arranged around a small stage. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow on arrangements of white orchids and blue hydrangeas. They matched my dress so perfectly I was sure it was deliberate. With Robert's arm linked through mine, we moved through the crowd. He moved confidently. He occasionally touched my arm or leaned closer as if needing guidance. But I noticed things. He never bumped into anyone. He seemed to anticipate people's movements. He turned toward approaching guests seconds before they spoke. "Robert, marvelous event as always." A woman in an emerald gown called out. "And who is your lovely companion?" "Elaine Harrington, chairman of the symphony board," Robert murmured to me. Then he raised his voice. "Elaine, may I present Martha Collins, a retired literature professor whose insights on educational accessibility have been invaluable." I shook her hand. I noted that he had upgraded my high school teaching position to a professorship, a small, strategic lie. "A pleasure, Professor Collins," Elaine beamed. "How refreshing to see new faces in Robert's circle. He's become such a recluse." "With good reason," Robert replied smoothly. "Large gatherings are challenging without sight." Of course. Elaine backpedaled immediately. "No offense taken," he assured her. "Now if you'll excuse us, I believe the mayor is waving for my attention." He wasn't, of course. The mayor was deep in conversation near the bar, his back to us. "The mayor is actually engaged elsewhere," I observed quietly as we moved away. Robert's lips quirked upward. "Is he? How convenient." Elaine's charity donations are inversely proportional to her conversational tact. I laughed despite myself. "A useful social escape strategy," I said, "claiming to see people who need your attention." His steps faltered for a fraction of a second. I realized my verbal trap too late. "A figure of speech," he recovered smoothly. "James usually signals me." But James was nowhere near us, and we both knew it. Before I could press the point, Sophia appeared. She was elegant in a burgundy gown. "Dad, we're about to begin the presentation," she said. "Martha, I've seated you at our family table." She glanced between us. A flicker of suspicion crossed her face. "I hope you're enjoying yourself." "Immensely," I replied. "Your father has been introducing me to quite an impressive array of people." "Has he?" Sophia's voice carried a note of concern. "Dad excels at networking despite his limitations." The emphasis on limitations was not lost on me. Sophia was marking her territory. She was reminding me of her father's vulnerability, or at least his supposed vulnerability. Dinner was a sumptuous 5-course meal. It was interspersed with brief speeches about the foundation's work. Robert delivered his remarks with charismatic precision. He never looked at notes which he supposedly couldn't read. He moved across the stage with practiced steps. They appeared cautious but never uncertain. I watched the performance with a new awareness. The audience responded with a mix of admiration and sympathy. It was the kind reserved for those who overcome great adversity. When he returned to our table, I leaned close. I pretended to help him find his water glass. "Impressive speech," I murmured. "One might almost forget you can't see your audience." He stiffened for a moment, then he relaxed. His fingers found mine beneath the tablecloth. His touch was light but electric. "One prepares thoroughly when performing blind," he murmured back. His emphasis on the word performing was so subtle I might have imagined it. Throughout dinner, I noticed more discrepancies. Robert identified a piece of asparagus on his plate without touching it. He reacted to one of Sophia's subtle hand signals from across the table. Most telling of all, A waiter dropped a tray of glasses at the far end of a room. It was a loud, crashing sound. Robert's head turned toward the noise a fraction of a second before it happened, as if he had seen the tray begin to fall. After dessert, the formal part of the evening came to a close. Guests began to mingle again. A small orchestra played soft classical music. Robert guided me toward a quieter alcove near the museum's sculpture garden. He held 2 champagne flutes. "You've been unusually quiet," he observed, having second thoughts about associating with me. "Not at all," I replied, accepting a glass. "I'm simply observing." "And what have your observations revealed, Professor Collins?" There was a hint of a challenge in his voice. It was almost playful. I took a deliberate sip of champagne. I considered my approach. The teacher in me wanted to lay out my evidence methodically. The woman whom her son had patronized wished to prove her sharpness. But something else guided my response. Something more curious than angry. "That Robert Wilson navigates his world with remarkable precision," I said. "For a man who supposedly can't see it." His expression remained neutral, but his posture changed. His shoulders tensed slightly. His spine straightened. "The human brain adapts impressively to sensory loss," he said. His voice was level. "Spatial memory, auditory cues." "Yes," I interrupted, "and noticing blue cars from moving vehicles, identifying earrings without touching them, turning toward accidents before they happen." I set down my champagne glass. The click on the table was deliberate and sharp. "I taught literature for 40 years, Mr. Wilson. I recognize a carefully constructed narrative when I see one." He was silent for a long time. His face was angled away from me. He seemed to be weighing his options. When he turned back, his voice was just above a whisper. "This is hardly the venue for such a conversation." "Then suggest a better one," I replied. My own boldness surprised me. A slight smile curved his mouth. "You are not what I expected, Martha Collins." "I rarely am these days," I said. "Age has a way of liberating one from expectations." He nodded thoughtfully. "The sculpture garden. 10 minutes. Take the east door and follow the path to the fountain." Before I could respond, he straightened up. His voice returned to its normal volume. "Sophia, there you are. I was just telling Martha about your remarkable work with the foundation." Sophia had approached so silently that I hadn't noticed her. Yet Robert had. Another slip in his performance. She glanced between us. Her expression was carefully neutral, but her eyes were shrewd. "Nothing remarkable about it," she replied. "Just continuing your vision. Martha, I hope Dad hasn't monopolized your entire evening. There are several board members who'd love to hear your perspective." The dismissal was apparent. Sophia wanted time alone with her father, to question my presence, possibly to warn him about whatever she suspected was happening between us. "I was just about to visit the ladies' room anyway," I said pleasantly. "If you'll excuse me." As I walked away, I could feel their eyes on me. Both pairs, I was certain. 10 minutes, Robert had said. 10 minutes until I might finally learn the truth. I checked my reflection in the restroom mirror. I adjusted a stray strand of silver hair. The woman who looked back at me seemed poised, elegant, unexpectedly resolute. Daniel wouldn't recognize this version of his mother. The woman is willing to meet a near stranger in a dark garden to confront him. For that matter, I hardly recognized myself. Yet as I slipped through the east door into the cool night air, I felt more alive than I had in years. The sculpture garden was a study in shadows and soft light. The air smelled of jasmine. I followed the stone path as he had instructed. My heels clicked softly on the pavers. I reached a circular fountain. Water cascaded over black marble in a hypnotic pattern. Robert was already there. His back was to me. He was a silhouette against the illuminated water. He had taken off his tinted glasses. They dangled from one hand. Without turning, he spoke. "You counted 7 discrepancies in my performance tonight. I noticed you cataloging them." I approached slowly. I came to stand beside him. 8, actually. Now he turned. For the first time, I saw his eyes directly. They were clear, but unmistakably focused on mine. There was no cloudiness, no wandering gaze, nothing to suggest any visual impairment at all. 8, he conceded with a slight nod. "What gave me away?" "The blue car yesterday was the first real clue," I replied. I held his gaze. "But it was the earrings tonight that confirmed it. You reached for them without any auditory cue." "A careless mistake," he said. "Normally, I'm more disciplined." "Why?" I asked. "Why pretend to be blind?" Robert sighed. He gestured to a stone bench nearby. "Shall we sit?" It's a rather long explanation. The bench was cool beneath me as we sat side by side. We were close enough that our shoulders nearly touched. Robert pocketed his glasses. He has no further use for them with me. 15 years ago, he began, I wasn't just wealthy. I was visible. Magazine covers, television interviews, meetings with presidents and prime ministers. My company's security innovations made me a public figure, in a field where anonymity is, ironically, the ultimate luxury. He paused. His profile stood out sharply against the dark background of the garden. Then came the threats. Not just the standard corporate espionage or harassment that comes with wealth. These were targeted threats against my family. Sophia was still in college then. Someone sent her photograph. They were taken inside her dormitory room. They also sent specifications about the security systems protecting our homes. They were implying they could get to her anytime they wanted. A chill ran down my spine. It had nothing to do with the night air. How terrifying, I whispered. Indeed, he said. His hands flexed in his lap. It was a subtle sign of remembered stress. We increased security, of course, but the psychological damage was done. Privacy, true privacy, had become impossible. His voice grew quiet. Then I developed macular degeneration. It was mild, treatable, hardly debilitating with modern medicine, but it gave me an idea. To disappear while remaining visible, I murmured. Understanding dawned. Precisely, he said. He turned toward me. His gaze was direct and unwavering. The world treats blind people differently. They look away. They speak as if you're not there. They underestimate you in profound ways. I saw an opportunity to create a shield, a way to move through the world with everyone seeing only what I wanted them to see. A wealthy blind recluse, inspiring occasional human interest stories, but otherwise left alone. But the charade is so elaborate, I observed. Your home, your behavior, this entire foundation. It began as a temporary solution, he admitted. A break from public scrutiny, but the longer it went on, the more it became a prison of my own making. His voice held a weariness I hadn't heard before. Now only James and Sophia know the truth. And you, Martha Collins, who saw through me with remarkable clarity in less than 2 days. I considered this extraordinary confession. The foundation work is genuine, though? Absolutely, he confirmed. Initially, the Blindness Foundation was part of the cover story, but I discovered a genuine passion for accessibility issues. The irony isn't lost on me. A sighted man advocating for the visually impaired while pretending to be one of them. A complicated ethical position, I observed. I didn't offer judgment. He smiled ruefully. One that keeps me awake at night more often than I'd care to admit. I've donated millions to blindness research and accessibility technology, perhaps as a form of penance. We sat in silence for a moment. The fountain's gentle splashing was a soothing backdrop. When I finally spoke, my own question surprised me. Why tell me the truth? You could have maintained the deception. I'm hardly a threat to your carefully constructed world. Robert turned fully toward me. His expression was suddenly vulnerable. It was a look his blind persona never allowed. Because when I sat next to you at that bus stop, I recognized something. Something I haven't encountered in 15 years. Authenticity. You weren't performing for anyone, Martha. Even humiliated and abandoned, you had a dignity that had nothing to do with appearances. His honesty caught me off guard. For a man who had lived behind a facade for so long, this felt almost painfully real. And then, he continued, you started noticing the inconsistencies. Most people see what they expect to see. You actually observed. It was refreshing. Terrifying, but refreshing. Terrifying me? I couldn't hide my skepticism. A billionaire afraid of a retired teacher. Not afraid of you, he clarified. Afraid of being seen. Really seen. Without the protection of wealth or disability to distort the perception. His hand moved tentatively toward mine on the bench. Do you understand what I'm saying, Martha? I did it with surprising clarity. Robert Wilson, for all his power and wealth, had been hiding from genuine connection. The blindness that started as protection had become a barrier between himself and any real human interaction. What will you do now? I asked. I let his fingers lightly touch mine. Maintain the charade with everyone else? For now, he admitted. The alternative would be complicated. But with you, he hesitated. With you, I'd like to be simply Robert. No performance. No pretense. The vulnerability in his request touched something deep inside me. It was a recognition of how rare authentic connections become as we age. How much of life becomes a performance. I think I'd like that, I replied softly, though it makes me wonder what other surprises you might be concealing, Mr. Wilson. His laugh was unexpected and genuine. Fair concern. But I promise the fake blindness was my most significant deception. Everything else, the wealth, the foundation, my character, that's all authentic. A discreet cough interrupted us. James stood at the garden entrance. His expression was professionally neutral, but he had undoubtedly seen our hands touching. He had seen Robert without his glasses. Sir, he said, Ms. Wilson is looking for you. The mayor is preparing to leave and wishes to say goodbye. Robert sighed. He reluctantly withdrew his hand from mine. Back to the performance, he murmured. He retrieved his glasses from his pocket. As he slid them on, I watched him transform. His posture subtly changed. His expression became more guarded. His movements became more measured. Before we returned to the gala, he turned to me one last time. Having someone who knows the truth. He paused, searching for the right words. Who knows me, after all these years? It feels like coming up for air after being underwater for too long. As we re-entered the bright lights of the party, I wondered what I had gotten myself into. A friendship? Something more? And with a man whose entire public life was a lie. Yet his confession in the garden felt more genuine than anything I had experienced in years. Sophia intercepted us immediately. Her eyes narrowed as we reappeared from the garden together. There you are, Dad. The mayor's leaving. Her gaze flicked to me, assessing. Martha, I hope you've enjoyed our little event. It's been illuminating, I replied. I met her eyes steadily. Her perfectly shaped eyebrow arched at my choice of words. Before she could respond, Robert squeezed my hand discreetly. Most illuminating indeed, he agreed. The private joke between us was a palpable thing in the air. The following week unfolded like a dream. My familiar, predictable routines were constantly interrupted by surreal moments. These moments made me question the boundaries of my own life. Robert called me every day. Our conversations roamed from literature to philosophy to the small details of our lives. He spoke freely now, at least when we were alone. The pretense of blindness was abandoned entirely in our private moments. On Wednesday, he invited me to dinner at his home. A proper meal, he specified, not just impromptu tea for a stranded bus passenger. I accepted. I ignored the small voice of caution that had governed my adult life. At 67, I reasoned, I had earned the right to make a few imprudent choices. Daniel called that afternoon. His timing was so suspicious. I wondered if he had developed a sixth sense for my unconventional decisions. I looked into the Wilson Foundation, he announced without any preamble. Their educational initiatives are actually quite impressive. They've funded literacy programs in 20 states. How thorough of you, I replied. I was selecting earrings for the evening. Any particular reason for your research? Just making sure everything's legitimate, he said. His hesitation was telling. You've been spending time with this man? I sighed. I set down the earrings. Daniel, your concern is noted, but it's unnecessary. Robert Wilson is exactly what he appears to be. A wealthy philanthropist with an interest in education. The irony of my statement was not lost on me. It was technically accurate, but it concealed a much bigger truth. I had become complicit in his deception, at least by omission. So you're seeing him socially? Daniel pressed. We're friends, I replied. The word felt both inadequate and presumptuous. What were we, exactly? Two people connected by a strange secret and perhaps something more elusive. When I arrived at Robert's mansion that evening, the atmosphere was different. James greeted me with his usual formal courtesy, but he led me to a smaller, more intimate dining room. The table was set for two. Candles provided most of the light. A fire crackled in a large stone hearth nearby. Robert was waiting for me. He was without his dark glasses. He was dressed casually in a tailored shirt and slacks. The sight of him, relaxed and unguarded, made my heart flutter. No performance tonight, he said, gesturing to his eyes. Just us. No audience to convince. I agreed. I accepted the glass of wine he offered. Except perhaps Sophia, he said with a wry smile. She will almost certainly interrogate the kitchen staff tomorrow about our dinner. I raised an eyebrow. She doesn't approve of me. She's protective, Robert clarified. He led me to the table. And suspicious by nature. It's a quality that serves her well as CEO. She hasn't quite decided if you're a potential threat or a positive development in my life. And which am I? The question was bolder than I had intended. Robert considered me over his wine glass. His gaze was so direct it still startled me. Both, perhaps. You've disrupted a carefully maintained equilibrium, but not necessarily in an unwelcome way. Dinner was exquisite. The conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked, laughed, and shared stories. It felt as natural as if we had known each other for years. I've been thinking about your situation, I said as we lingered over dessert. The ethical implications of your deception. Ah. Robert set down his fork. I wondered when the professor would deliver her moral assessment. Not an assessment, I corrected. A question. Has it been worth it? 15 years of performing blindness. The isolation. The constant vigilance. What has it given you that compensates for what it has taken away? He didn't answer right away. His fingers traced the stem of his wine glass. Safety initially, he said finally. Peace to some degree. the freedom to observe without being observed, a one-way mirror between myself and the world. He looked up, his eyes meeting mine. But lately, I've been questioning if the protection is worth the isolation. Because of me? I asked, suddenly self-conscious. Because of what meeting you revealed, he clarified. How habitual the performance has become, how reflexive the barriers are. You saw through them with such ease. It made me wonder how much of myself I've lost behind them. The vulnerability in his admission touched me deeply. Before I could respond, the dining room door opened abruptly. Sophia entered without knocking. She froze on the threshold. Her eyes widened. She saw her father without his glasses. She saw him looking directly at me in the soft candlelight. Dad. Her voice was a mixture of confusion and alarm. Robert didn't startle. He didn't scramble for his glasses. He sighed softly. He gestured to the empty chair beside him. Join us, Sophia. It seems we have something to discuss. Her gaze darted between us. Comprehension dawned slowly on her face. She knows, she whispered. The words were full of fear. She figured it out, Robert confirmed. Rather quickly, in fact. Sophia turned to me. Her professional polish was gone. Genuine fear was in its place. Who have you told? No one, I assured her. I understood her panic, and I have no intention of telling anyone. She remained standing. Her posture was rigid with tension. Do you have any idea what's at stake here? The foundation, the company, our privacy, our safety, all of it depends on maintaining this. I understand the complexity, I replied calmly. I drew on decades of experience diffusing tension in the classroom. Your father's secret is safe with me. Based on what? She challenged. A week's acquaintance? Some misguided romantic connection? The dismissive way she said romantic connection stung more than I wanted to admit. Robert intervened. Sophia, that's enough. Martha has shown more insight and discretion in 1 week than most people show in a lifetime. I trust her. You trusted her enough to risk everything, Sophia countered. She finally sank into the chair. Without consulting me. I didn't plan this, Robert explained patiently. Martha observed discrepancies no one else has noticed in 15 years. Instead of exposing me or using the information for personal gain, she confronted me privately. Sophia studied me with a new intensity. She was reassessing me. What do you want, Mrs. Collins? She asked bluntly. From this situation, from my father, there must be something. Sophia. Robert's voice was sharp. It's a fair question, I interjected. I understood her protective instinct. I turned to face her directly. What I want, I said, is exactly what I've already received. Honest conversation, genuine connection, the respect of being seen as I am, not as a stereotype. Your father offered me dignity when my own son treated me as incompetent. I've offered him the simple courtesy of authentic interaction, without a performance. Sophia's expression softened slightly. And if things progress between you? She asked. The longer this continues, the greater the risk of exposure. The implication was clear. Any relationship between Robert and me was a vulnerability. Before I could respond, Robert reached across the table. He deliberately took my hand. Then we'll address that challenge together, he said. His gaze moved from his daughter to me. Because for the first time in 15 years, I'm experiencing something worth the risk. The simple declaration changed everything. Sophia's rigid posture eased. A warm certainty spread through me. Whatever complicated path lay ahead, we would navigate it together. I should go, I said finally. I knew that the father and daughter needed to talk. They needed privacy to process this new development. It's getting late. Later that evening, as James drove me home, I thought about the extraordinary turn my life had taken. A week ago, I was a retired teacher fighting for autonomy from my son. Now, I was entangled in a billionaire's elaborate lie. I was contemplating a relationship that would require navigating complexities I could barely imagine. Yet, despite the complications, I felt more vibrantly alive than I had in years. Saturday morning brought unexpected sunshine. I was enjoying coffee on my small balcony when the intercom buzzed. Daniel stood in the hallway. He held a bakery box. A look of determined cheerfulness was on his face. Peace offering, he said, lifting the box. Those almond croissants you like. I recognized the gesture. It was an attempt to reset our relationship after the bus stop incident. The timing, however, seemed suspicious. It was too perfectly aligned with my growing connection to Robert. Over coffee and pastries, Daniel engaged in thoughtful conversation. He talked about his children's activities, an upcoming work conference, neighborhood news. Only after his second cup did he bring up the real subject on his mind. So this friendship with Robert Wilson, he began casually. It seems to be continuing. It is, I confirmed. I brushed pastry crumbs from my fingers. We enjoy each other's company. Daniel nodded. His marketing mind was visibly at work. He's an interesting choice of friend, he said. His reputation for reclusiveness is well documented. Perhaps that's changing, I replied noncommittally. Mom, Daniel said as he set down his cup, I want you to be careful. Men like Wilson operate in different spheres, with different rules. The power imbalance alone. Power imbalance? I interrupted. I couldn't suppress a laugh. I'm not a naive young woman, Daniel. I'm a 67-year-old retired teacher. I've raised a child, buried a husband, and managed my own life quite capably. That's not what I meant, he said. He had the grace to look embarrassed. It's just that people with his level of wealth and influence often have complicated lives. Agendas that aren't immediately apparent. If only he knew how right he was, though not in the way he imagined. Robert's complicated life was far beyond typical wealthy eccentricity. I appreciate your concern, I said, softening my tone, but I trust my judgment about Robert. Complicated life and all. Daniel was about to press the issue when his phone buzzed. He checked the screen. His expression changed to surprised recognition. It's the office on a Saturday, he said. I should take this. He stepped onto the balcony for privacy. Through the glass door, I watched his conversation transform. He went from irritated to intensely interested. When he came back inside, his demeanor was completely different. That was incredible, he said, slipping his phone into his pocket. My agency just got a call from the Wilson Foundation. They're looking for a marketing partner for their National Literacy Initiative, and somehow my name came up as a recommended contact. I kept my expression neutral. Internally, I was connecting the obvious dots. What a fortunate coincidence, I said. Coincidence? Daniel repeated slowly. He studied my face. Mom, did you have something to do with this? I mentioned to Robert that you work in marketing, I admitted. Nothing more specific than that. Daniel sat down heavily on my sofa. He was processing this new development. This account would be huge, he said. The foundation's annual marketing budget is in the millions. Then you should prepare a compelling presentation, I suggested mildly. He looked up sharply. Is this why you've been spending time with Wilson? To advance my career. The question stung. It presumed my relationship with Robert had some ulterior motive. Absolutely not, I said firmly. My friendship with Robert stands entirely on its own. If he's chosen to consider your agency, that's his business decision. Daniel looked embarrassed. I'm sorry, that was unfair, he said. He paused, weighing his following words. It's just difficult to reconcile the reclusive billionaire from business journals with the man who's suddenly having dinner with my mother. People are often more complex than their public personas suggest, I replied. The understatement almost made me smile. After Daniel left, I received a text from Robert. Was that too transparent an olive branch? Sophia suggested a more subtle approach, but I find that at my age, time for subtlety is limited. RW. I smiled at the message. Transparent but effective, I texted back. He's simultaneously suspicious and delighted, much like Sophia regarding our friendship. His reply came instantly. Sunday brunch tomorrow. The Botanical Gardens have a new spring exhibition. We can be appropriately public while maintaining our private understanding. The careful balance in his invitation touched me. He acknowledged both his public persona and our private truth. I'd like that very much, I replied. Sunday's trip to the Botanical Gardens was an education in Robert's public performance. James drove us there. Robert emerged from the car with his dark glasses and white cane. His movements were carefully calibrated. They suggested dependence while maintaining dignity. I found myself unconsciously adapting. I offered my arm at the right moments. I naturally described visual details. It all reinforced his supposed condition. You're a natural accomplice, he murmured as we strolled through a corridor of blooming cherry trees. Most people overcompensate. Too loud, too descriptive, too helpful. Years of teaching reluctant students to appreciate Shakespeare, I replied. One develops a certain subtlety. We attracted occasional glances. The elegantly dressed blind man and his silver-haired companion. We generated curiosity but not recognition. In public, Robert was careful. He maintained an appropriate distance. Our connection was expressed through conversation, not touch. It was only when we found ourselves alone in the tropical conservatory that he took off his glasses. His eyes met mine directly. This performance grows exhausting in your presence, he admitted quietly. I find myself wanting to simply look at you, to see your expressions change without the filter of pretense. The intensity of his gaze made me suddenly self-conscious. The lines at the corners of my eyes, the silver in my hair, the markers of age I had long ago accepted. What do you see when you look at me? The question came out unbidden. His smile deepened. Clarity, he said. Intelligence. A woman comfortable in her own skin. A rare and beautiful combination at any age. He replaced his glasses as voices approached. Later, over lunch, our conversation turned to more practical matters. Sophia is arranging a discreet background check, he informed me. His tone was apologetic. Standard protocol for anyone who learns about my situation. I set down my fork. The news didn't bother me. I assumed as much, I said. She's protective of you. She's thorough, he corrected, and concerned about potential exploitation. The check is as much for your protection as mine. Confirmation that you understand the legal implications of our shared secret. I considered this. There would be lawsuits if your deception became public. Almost certainly, he said. Business partners, shareholders, even the foundation could claim fraud. He sighed. The irony isn't lost on me. I created this fiction for protection. Now I'm potentially vulnerable because of it. And yet you've trusted me with this knowledge, I observed. A calculated risk, he replied with a small smile. Though increasingly, the calculation seems less important than the connection. As James drove us back to my apartment, I thought about the strange duality of our relationship. In public, we performed one reality. In private, we shared another. Daniel's presentation to your foundation is tomorrow, I mentioned as we neared my building. Yes, Sophia will be evaluating their proposal, Robert confirmed. I've recused myself from the decision to avoid any favoritism. Thank you for that, I said. Whatever happens should be based on merit. He nodded. Integrity matters to you, he said. Says the man pretending to be blind, I countered with gentle irony. His laugh was genuine. Touché, Martha Collins. You have a remarkable talent for cutting through pretense, even my own. James pulled to the curb. Before I could get out, Robert took my hand. Having someone who knows both versions of me, he said softly, is more significant than I can adequately express. Thank you for carrying that dual knowledge with such grace. His simple sincerity stayed with me long after the car had gone. The following weeks developed a new rhythm. It felt both extraordinary and strangely natural. Robert and I settled into a pattern. We had private dinners at his home where he could be himself completely. We also had public outings where we navigated his carefully maintained blindness charade. Each setting had its own kind of intimacy. The private moments of unguarded conversation. The public conspiracy of a shared secret. Daniel's marketing agency won the contract from the Wilson Foundation. The news both delighted and perplexed my son. It was the strangest meeting, he told me during a family dinner at his house. Sophia Wilson grilled us like we were on trial. Then she announced we'd been selected before we even finished our presentation. Your proposal must have been exceptional, I suggested. I avoided my daughter-in-law Angela's knowing gaze across the table. She had her own theories about my relationship with Robert. That's just it, Daniel continued. Bewilderment was evident in his voice. We didn't even present half our materials. It was almost as if the decision had been made before we arrived. I kept my expression neutral. I suspected Robert had influenced the process. Despite his claim of recusal, the contract was a convenient bridge between our worlds. A professional connection that justified our personal one in Daniel's business-oriented mind. Our dessert was interrupted by a text message. My heart quickened when I read it. Unexpected development. Need to speak with you urgently. Car on the way. RW. I made my excuses shortly after. I claimed I was tired. Daniel's suspicious glance told me he wasn't convinced. Outside their suburban home, James was already waiting. His expression was more guarded than usual. What's happened? I asked once we were moving. Mr. Wilson will explain, he replied. He offered nothing more. At the mansion, Robert was waiting in his study. It was a space I now recognized as his true domain, the place where real decisions were made. He stood by the window without his glasses. Tension was evident in his posture. Victor Reeves, he said without preamble as I entered. The investigative journalist. He's publishing a feature article next week about the curious case of Robert Wilson's selective blindness. My stomach dropped. He has evidence, circumstantial but compelling. Robert gestured to a folder on his desk. Sophia received an advanced copy from a contact at the magazine. Reeves has been investigating for months. He's interviewed former staff, analyzed public appearances, even consulted medical experts about my symptoms. I skimmed the article. It methodically built a case against Robert. It questioned his condition without making a direct accusation. The journalist had documented subtle inconsistencies in Robert's behavior. He noted the lack of medical specialists visiting the mansion. He quoted anonymous sources describing incidents where Robert had seemingly reacted to visual stimuli. This stops just short of calling me a fraud, Robert observed, while planting the seed in readers' minds. legally careful but practically damaging. What will you do? He sighed, running a hand through his silver hair. Sophia and our legal team are exploring options. A preemptive statement, legal action for defamation, or simply ignoring it. I looked at the article again. None of his evidence is definitive, I said. It's all circumstantial, open to interpretation. True, Robert agreed. But it raises questions that could lead to more scrutiny, which could eventually uncover more concrete evidence. I set the article down. I understood the unspoken concern, including my sudden appearance in your life, I said. He nodded grimly. Reeves mentions an unidentified female companion, observed at recent public events. He's noticed you, Martha, though he hasn't identified you yet. The implications settled heavily between us. My presence in Robert's life had created a new vulnerability in his careful facade. The realization must have shown on my face. Robert moved quickly to sit beside me. He took my hands in his. This isn't your fault, he said firmly. Reeves has been investigating for months, long before we met. If anything, I've been growing careless over time, too comfortable in the performance. Still, I replied, my presence complicates your situation. Perhaps we should be more discreet until this passes. Robert's expression tightened. Is that what you want? To step back from this? The question carried more weight than just the immediate crisis. We had been dancing around definitions. We allowed our connection to evolve without labels. Now, faced with external pressure, we needed clarity. No, I answered honestly. That's not what I want at all. His relief was visible. Good, he said, because I've grown quite attached to having you in my life, Martha Collins. The simple admission shifted something between us. Robert raised one hand to my cheek. The gesture was so tender my breath caught. When he leaned forward to kiss me, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. It was the culmination of weeks of shared secrets and honest conversation. The kiss was gentle at first, then it deepened. Decades of experience replaced youthful uncertainty. When we finally parted, I found myself smiling, despite the crisis that had brought me here. Well, I said softly, that certainly complicates the journalist's investigation. Robert laughed. The tension in his face eased. Martha Collins, he said, your remarkable ability to find humor in difficult situations is one of the many reasons I'm falling in love with you. The declaration hung in the air. It was honest and unhurried. At our age, such words carry a different weight. Less dramatic passion, more considered certainty. I'm rather fond of you as well, Robert Wilson, I replied. My understatement was deliberate. We both understood, fraudulent blindness and all. His smile widened, but it quickly sobered. We need to decide how to handle this. If Reeves publishes his article, I finished for him, then we face it together, whatever consequences come. Late that evening, as James drove me home, I thought about my extraordinary life. In just over a month, I had gone from a widow fighting for independence to a woman entangled in a billionaire's lie. And now I was facing a public scandal. Yet I felt more engaged with life than I had in years. The woman who once planned her days around book clubs now navigated dual realities with a strange exhilaration. Daniel was waiting outside my apartment building. His expression was a mixture of concern and indignation. You left dinner to meet him, didn't you? He demanded as I stepped from the car. Mom, what's really going on between you and Wilson? I sighed. I was too emotionally drained to make up excuses. It's complicated, Daniel. And yes, we're more than casual acquaintances. Are you? He struggled with the question. Romantically involved with this man? The directness of his question, right there on the sidewalk, was both inappropriate and somehow liberating. The old Martha might have deflected. The woman I was becoming chose honesty. Yes, I replied simply. We are. Daniel's expression cycled through shock, confusion, and finally, a strange resignation. I don't understand this at all, he admitted. But I suppose that doesn't matter, does it? Your understanding matters to me, I told him gently. But your approval isn't required. I've spent years prioritizing your comfort, Daniel. Now I'm choosing my own happiness. As he drove away, I entered my quiet apartment. I felt an unexpected sense of peace. Despite the threatening article, despite the complicated relationship, and despite my son's discomfort, at 67, I had finally realized that life's most meaningful chapters might still be unwritten, waiting for the courage to turn the page.